we had so many submissions and so many hackathon submissions that we changed that schedule a bit. So we have talks until like 3 p.m. I think, and after that there's a hackathon session. So we will at least have a DuckDuckGo hackathon when Getty shows up. And I think Carl and Jonathan, the Perl 6 hackers, are leaving this afternoon. So if you're interested in hacking Perl 6, I can probably help, and we can maybe do something together. And I think that's about it. If you want to organize some hackathon, work with people on a project that you are engaged with, well, that you help managing it, it's fine. Just announce it maybe when we start the hackathon session, and we can find some people that we want to help with. And I think that's it. So we're starting with Rally Play. Welcome.
Thank you. Morning. I haven't spoke yet, so you don't know if you can be laughing. This was for how do you say that in Polish? Good morning.
Dzień dobry.
Okay, I'm just going to try. Okay, good morning. Again, like you said, I'm Brian Foy. You might have seen my name on some books. I brought some of those. They are sitting out in the front desk. I don't know how the organizers are going to give those away, but there's a Programming Perl 4th edition, and I think a couple of intermediate Perls. I keep getting these for free. I get them faster than I can get rid of them. So please do something, implement Perl 6 or something, and maybe you'll get a free book. Today I want to talk about reverse installing in CPAN. And I don't really have a good title for this because I don't know how I want to say this, but I hopefully can explain it to you as we go on. Some of you who have listened to my other talks might remember that I like to do a little bit of CPAN archaeology. It's not really providing anything useful to the world, it's not clever, it's not making a new language or a great new module. I'm just going through and trying to collect all the historical information we can about CPAN and what happened, and then try to provide that information to other people so they can do interesting things with it. And I'll talk about some of those as we go on. This is just sort of what I like to do, to take a big mess of data that's not structured in some way and turn it into something that other people can use. I don't particularly care about the uses. So here's what I want to do. I want to take something that's already installed. You already have it all installed somewhere. You don't remember how it got there. Maybe you showed up at this company and it was already a mess. You say, I want to start managing this code somehow, but you need to be able to make that repository again on some other machine. Or not that repository, but that installation. So what I want to do is look at that installation, whatever you've done. I don't care what it is. I want to get all the edge cases. I want to look at all that information, and I want to turn that into a CPAN-like repository that if you point to CPAN-M or whatever your favorite CPAN tool is at that repository, it will install the thing I started with. That's my goal. Now, I don't know how quick I'm going to get there. This might be harder than Perl 6. I don't know.
There's a module on CPAN for this.
Excuse me?
There's a module on CPAN for this discovery. This discovery, which is scanning your complete libraries and telling you which exactly distribution this comes from.
Who wrote this?
Who wrote this? I don't know, but it was.
Anyway, we'll talk about it later. I'll go on this one because I don't think it actually works.
Good stuff.
So here's what I have. If I look at my particular installation, I have about 10,000 files. Yeah, I don't know how they got there. I don't know what distributions they belong to, if they came from Perl or they came from something else. That's about the order of magnitude of the stuff that I have to deal with, and just the stuff that I have on my laptop. So if you've installed Catalyst or something which installs most of CPAN, you might have a bunch more. But here's my goal. Before I get to the goal. I want to make it clear that I intend this for a one-time run thing. You go into a company who is trying to figure out what their stuff is, they run this tool once, they get this repository, and they don't keep doing this again. Once they get into the better practices of managing their code and things like that, they don't need to keep doing this every time they want to make a change. They can get into something like Harden or Pinto or Stratopan or any of these other things and go on from there. So I can play a lot of tricks here where I don't have to necessarily be fast because you're not going to be running it every time. You might want to run this overnight. It's not going to take that long. And then you have your answer and you're done, and you can hopefully not use this tool anymore. So here's my goal. I want to figure out 95% of what you have. Now there's going to be a lot of reasons that I can't get that other 5%, and we'll talk about some of those too. But 95% is the goal. And as we're going through this, I want you to look at the things I'm doing and seeing how close each of those things is getting to this particular goal. So let's just start with, come on in. First I have to do the indexing part. I have talked about this plenty of times in other Perl conferences, so I'm not going to kill you with the stuff that goes on here. I've got a complete version of BackPan. Most people who are working on this sort of stuff do. I want to go through all of those files, there's about 250,000 of them, and figure out everything that is in that distribution. I want to be able to recognize it if I see it somewhere else. That's my goal. I've done a lot of other work on this sort of stuff to take that and turn it into other things. You might have heard of my DPAN project, where you just throw a bunch of tarballs into a directory, and then run this DPAN command on that directory, and it spits you all the pause-like stuff that you need. So you can automatically, right away, use that thing as your repository. That was one outcome of that. But this, I'm just collecting data. I just want to look at this distribution. Now, the interesting thing when I do this is I get to see every mistake that everyone's ever made on their Perl distributions. Basically, I want to do this. I want to take all the files, but in this case, I want to say the PM files and turn them into YAML, which has all sorts of stuff in it, and I will show that to you in a minute. But some of the interesting things that have come out of this is that a lot of people, not a lot, there are 5 out of 10,000. That seems like a lot to me. Accidentally put their local lib inside of their working directory when they were working on their module, and they just went and they tarred up their distribution and they uploaded it. So you have 10 or so distributions on the BackPan, because these things quickly disappeared, that are about 30 megabytes and have all sorts of interesting files in them. But I know that, so I can go back and say, how many times have people made this mistake before? Or how many times have people made some other mistake before? And so on. There's lots of interesting things I want to do with this once I have this. And this is the fun part here, is turning all that distribution stuff into this YAML file. And I don't really care particularly about the YAML, but I wanted to keep some idea of the Perl objects around that I was using internally. I could easily turn this into JSON, but then I lose the, some of the Perl stuff. So I collect a bunch of stuff. This goes on a long, long, long way. There's a couple thousand lines of different things I collect. Some for every file in the distribution. But the interesting one I want to look at here is the digest. This is the thing that's going to be key for the stuff I'm talking about today. Hopefully we don't have any collisions in all of our CPAN indexing, so every file that's on BackPan will have its own digest. We haven't got up to the, what is it, 4 billion? What's the space of the MD5?
2 raised to the power of 128.
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. So hopefully we don't have a collision there. There was one point when I was talking to Lincoln Steiner, the author of CGI.PM, he's a genomics guy, and I was asking him, can we give everyone their own MD5 digest? And he thought about it for a minute and said, yeah, there's plenty of space for everyone in the entire history of the human race to have their own MD5. I don't think we have that many files on BackPan. That doesn't mean we won't have a collision. So anyway, we've got that digest. So now what I want to do is go through the local stuff that you have installed and collect all the digests for that too. Now the digest is the simple thing. Don't get too hung up on the MD5 portion of it. There's all sorts of other things that we can look at because I collect all that information. That previous step, I collected way more information than I probably ever need, so I have it available in case I need it. So what I'll just do is go through my entire installation and make some sort of output. This is very simple. I'll take a file name and I'll collect its digest. Now down here I found that particular digest that I had in that index. So great, now I'm going to be able to connect those two files. It's not going to be that simple though. I thought that would be really interesting and very simple and get me most of the way there, but it turns out there's all sorts of other interesting things you find out about CPAN and what CPAN authors do as you're going through this. Now that's actually the really exciting part. Now you might watch the Indiana Jones movies and he's getting the golden idol or whatever, but it's not just about getting the golden idol, right? Because the bad guy is always the guy who just wants the golden head. Indiana Jones just wants it because it's cool and it says something about the culture. I just want to find out what people have done and how they do things. I don't really care necessarily about the modules or making this work 100%, as long as I can figure out why do we actually do the things that we do, and use that information and say why should we do things some other way in the future. So anyway, let's look at what happens now. So I have my database. My CPAN has a whole bunch of digests in it. So here's a whole bunch of stuff. There's 4 million records in that database, which is not so bad. Even SQLite can handle that probably well if you index it correctly. And then I'll have some shorter list that is all the local stuff I have installed. And there's just it. There's this digest here that is the same as this digest here. Great. So I've identified the distribution, right? Do you think so?
No. Okay.
I thought I would at the start.
Same distribution.
Hold on.
Okay.
I'm giving a talk. You give your own talk. Okay, so let's look at some of the problems we have with this. My first problem is I rely on the my CPAN stuff actually working. So I have done the indexing correctly, and I've collected the right things, and I've done the, I got the digest correctly. I think one of the early mistakes I made through this process was I collected all this stuff, I ran my thing and indexed all of backpan, the 250,000 files over a weekend, using up my machine so I couldn't use it for anything interesting like watching movies or anything, because it was using up all the processors. And I get done and I find out that everything has the same digest, because I had put an undef value somewhere or whatever, so that MD5 thing was getting the same data. Great, I just wasted 3 days. All sorts of other things you can imagine happen as I do this. I haven't made every problem yet, but I probably will. One of the things I have to keep doing, for instance, is I have to keep updating. People are releasing CPAN modules every day, and they're releasing them faster and faster and faster. If you look at the graph of CPAN contributions, they're just going up. If these people would just stop releasing modules, I can have a complete database. No, they're not going to do that. So I have to keep doing this. Okay. And my indexing is also getting better. So we've looked at the digest thing, that's really easy, but I'm looking at other things. I want to know what's the version in there, what namespaces do you use? Get some sort of file fingerprint, like how much of your file is actually code and how much of it is just comments. I can use all that sort of information for other things later, but I'm still working on that stuff. So that's getting nicer and getting faster too. Sometimes I have to re-index. I decide that I want to do something slightly different. I want to collect some other bit of information. Now I have to go back through all those 250,000 files and get that. But that's not really a big deal. I've got most of that figured out and it just runs. And you can hear some of my other talks to look at that. So all of that stuff, that problem affects maybe 100 out of the 10,000 files that I have to look at in my local distribution. Not so bad. So remember, what was my goal? 95%, right? So this is not cutting into that so much. Okay? But you've heard that joke, about efficiency. No one minds giving up a factor of 2, but when you have 10 people doing that on your project, you've got 2 to the 10 breakdown in efficiency. But this isn't going to be cumulative. Okay, so here is the first real problem with this sort of technique. We saw that we had those same digest in my local and in the my CPAN database. Now, I didn't think about this when I started. It was a really interesting thing that I discovered was that I have this digest here, I have this file here, but it shows up in a bunch of different distributions. Here's foobar 1.23 and 1.34, 1.56, and some other stuff. BAS, a completely different distribution, has the same file in it. Some people don't change that particular file or that module that they're looking at. This is especially true for people who use undef as their version for that module. If they don't change it in the next distribution, the version doesn't even update, and so it's the exact same file for another distribution. Now, that's fine. I can understand if that particular file didn't change, you don't need to update the version number. I just don't particularly like undef as a version number. I'd like it to have something, even if it doesn't change. But then most people don't like managing different version numbers across all of their modules in the same distribution. There's a sort that either give one thing the version number, or it's the sort that just give everything the same version number. So it's even changing files that don't change, really. Now, the other interesting thing I found was that sometimes these files show up in other people's distributions because they just copy them from somewhere else. Some things wanted to install their own version.pm, for instance, and so they thought, okay, I'll just grab the real version.pm, I'll put it in my distribution, and then, they forgot to do whatever change they're going to do. And then, so that shows up in some other distribution as well. A few others, some people have done that with warnings. I should make a list of all of these files somewhere. They don't get indexed. Pause doesn't care about this because it will just ignore them. So it doesn't affect us as users. But that still happens, and I have to figure out what to do with that if I'm going to match up the things that are in my local Perl installation to the things that I have in the database. So here's how I do that. I have my candidates. Here's all the things that have this thing in pink, the E2 3P thing. And so what I do is say, okay, if it's one of these things, then all the other files that came with that distribution must also be in my local Perl installation. Right? So if I install Toolbar 1.23, then those 4 digests should also be over here. So I now am going the other way. Before I was looking through that to get this list. Now I'm looking at this list to go back to here. Right? So I'll highlight all the things in those particular distributions that also show up in my local installation. And I figure out there's only one thing there, that one in the green box, Toolbar 1.56, that actually has all the files that are local. Now I can get rid of all the other distributions from that particular release, Toolbar. So I've got that. And then I just go through and I'll do the same thing for the rest of the digests that are there. So I can identify the BAS thing there. So I know that distribution's in my local repository. I don't see anything from that last one, the quack. So I can get rid of that thing. And now I just have to say, okay, I've identified those files. I don't have to care about those in my local distribution anymore. Or I can say local distribution, my local installation. And so I can reduce that list to just those things. Now I have to go through and try other tricks to identify those modules. Okay? Everyone with me so far? It seems pretty simple. That part is really simple. Now how far do you think that gets me? Anyone want to guess? 5%? So that only affects, so I'm about 2% off. So if I go through that process, there's about 2% of the files that I can't identify. Or 2% of the files I can't match up with a distribution. Okay? And there's going to be various reasons for this. And this is the part that is really making it fun for me. Is now, okay, why is this data off by this 2%? So again, this is only 200 files out of 10,000.
Generated files.
What's that?
Generated files. On installation, generated files.
Okay, when I get to that part, I'll say it in my presentation. So if I was doing this by hand, now remember, this is a one-shot tool that I intend someone to run once, see what happened, make their distribution repository, and then move on. If they have to go through 200 files by hand, it's not so bad. They can say, oh yeah, I know what that is, or I know what that is, or something like that. Okay, let's move on. Problem number 2, go ahead. Okay. So now part of this is that I also want to do this for the particular Perl. Now there's all sorts of ways that I could cheat on this. I could say, I know you tell me what Perl you're using, or I discover which Perl you're using by looking at the files, or something like that. And then I can take out all the stuff that came from that Perl. But I really would love this process to work in the same way it does for the modules, as it will for Perl. So I know because of all the things that Perl would have installed, this is the one that you actually installed. So I want to go through that same process. But imagine, or remember, how we actually do this. We install Perl, so Perl puts a bunch of stuff in some directory, and it's there. And then we come along and we say, oh, I want to have this other test module, so we start installing that test module. But Shorn has also updated MakeMaker, so you install over the stuff that Perl installed, this other distribution. Now you don't have all the files that Perl installed because some other things have come along and overwritten them, or replaced them, or done whatever it's going to do. So we have to handle that part too. So we do something like this. So again, here are a bunch of digests I have locally, and here are some candidates that I have. Maybe this thing will be 5.12.1 or 5.14.2 or whatever it is. I have 3 files that don't match here, and I have 3 files that don't match here, 3 don't match here, and so on. Now each of these things, each of these distributions have about 700 things that I have to identify. Perl is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is why they're talking about removing things from Perl now. The current RFC is to get rid of CGI.pm. And they're also talking about removing module build. CPAN plus is now deprecated. So those numbers hopefully will get smaller. But I still have, out of 600 files, if I'm missing just a few percent of that, that's still messing up my algorithm here. Okay, so what I do is I have these digests here and I have these digests here. These things aren't going to be in there because I think that something else has replaced them. So now how am I going to identify those things so that I can see if I get a really good score for these Perl distributions? So I can do this. I can look at the ones that I've already removed. So I know that I've already removed these digests because I identified them earlier, and I know that which distributions they came from. So I can't just match up the numbers, though, those digests with the ones in my CPAN, because there's nothing that connects them. They're different files. But what I can do is this. I can say, oh, but I know what that file name was. I know where that digest came from. I know it's this file name, libcpan.pm. And I can probably match that up to cpan/cpan/cpan.pm in one of these distributions. They're not the same path, so it gets a little wacky. Now it also gets interesting because different Perl distributions have done this differently. Putting things in CPAN now has been a relatively new idea. We used to put things in, what was it? We had X and DIS, and then we have CPAN now, and there's maybe a few other places. So I have to say, how am I going to translate this path to this path? And I can do some stuff. That's just work. It's really boring. But I can go along and say, okay, can I match up all of these files here with those files there? And I can. Let's say I do that with Perl 514. I have now matched those file names, and I can say, okay, I know that I have already seen those files which would have come from Perl in some other distribution. So let's just take those out of as candidates. So I'll just remove those. And hopefully what I would get at that point is a pretty good indication that there's nothing missing in this particular Perl distribution, or there's the fewest things missing from this Perl distribution. And I can choose that one over all the other ones. Maybe there'd be a bunch more stuff missing from 519 because no one's installed that yet, or whatever it is. There's not a 519 yet, is it? Right? Because they just started that branch. Yeah. Now the other interesting thing that I have been working on Mystic with this is that something like Perl 5.14.2-RC1 or RC2 is almost equivalent to the release one because they don't change the modules. They might update the Perl data or Delta rather, or something like that, but they're not saying, I'm going to put in this whole other version of test symbol. So that's easy to figure out too, because like I say, I'm just going to get rid of all of the candidates. This, again, is the fun part for me, is like what sort of things do we know in our brains that we just assume that I have to teach this system. Okay, so how far does that get me? I don't know yet. I'm not sure that's how it is. So I choose 514. I get rid of all those other distributions. I can cheat, as I said before. I can look at config.pm. I can look at the path for where it's actually installed, because it might say I've installed it user local lib, and then it says Perl and like Perl 514.2. I can cheat like that, but I don't want to cheat. I want it just to happen. Because if I can solve it for the Perl thing, I can probably solve it for BioPerl or Catalyst or something else that's really complicated. Actually, I don't think Catalyst is that complicated. It just requires a bunch of other things. What are the big Perl distributions that we have out there? I don't know. But if those things can do it, I can do it for Perl. So I just don't have to do this for this. So this gets me, this is the big thing I have to solve now, and I've still been working on it. I missed about 9% here because I don't pick one of those Perls, and these things are installing almost 700 files. So if I miss pulling out 700 files from the things I have installed, that's a big chunk. Now I can cheat, like I said, I can cheat, and I can remove this very easily, but I don't want to do that. And you can actually look at the rest of those things, the rest of those digests, and say this has belonged to a core module. Say, okay, it's core, I don't have to worry about it so much. But again, like I said, I want to get to that naturally. Okay, problem 3, and this is the one, this is the fun one that I got to work on last week. Because I am the stupid sort of person who will find where I've installed a file, and I'll bring that up to my editor, and I will change it. Despite the fact I tell everyone in mastering Perl not to do that, and to copy it into a directory that you add to your lib through -i or use lib or something like that, so you don't mess up your original source. I, however, do not read my books, I just write them, and so I do this, and then I get misses. And now what happens is that I miss a distribution by like 1 or 2 files. So I'll have something like foodbar 1.23, which almost matches except for 1 file because I edited that guy. There is something slightly different, and it might be just white space. The one that I played with last week was one out of Perl credit because I was going to add some new policy category to it, and I was talking to Jeff about it, and I said, oh, I just really need those braces to line up before I do this work, and so I did that. And I was talking to him, he said, oh no, I'll just put it in there, no problem. I saved my file, I didn't make any changes that were functional. Now my file is different from the one that was supposed to be installed because it was just white space. But this is a really fun thing to handle though. I really like the way I'm going to do this. So anyway, I can say, okay, I have that file that's different. I can go through that same process I just went through with the Perl stuff. I can say, let's translate these things into file names. I have all this stuff. Okay, now I have a lib-foo-bar and I have a lib-foo-bar, so I can look at those 2 files. There's lots of things I can do here. In my database, I know the version numbers and the various other code signatures for these 2 files, so I could compare those. But I'm working on this other idea right now. Okay, I don't think these other things match because they have different file names, but let's try to compare those 2 things, and let's do this. Okay, so we match up those 2 files, and then I do this. Let's take a difference from the thing that I have installed to the thing that's in that particular distribution which I think it came from. Now, you might not know this, but with this, if I do this, I can actually give this to CPAN.pm and it can figure it out. There's a thing that Andreas has made, and so many things Andreas makes are so incredibly prescient that it makes you think that Andreas traveled back in time to make CPAN.pm, despite what you might look at in the code. But he has a way that he can mutate a distribution as you're installing it. So if you know something isn't going to work, you can say, I'm going to make this thing called a distro-prefs file, and I'm not going to show you what that looks like. Oh, and by the way, I could do this with a bunch of distributions and just take the smallest diff, because a lot of things might be off by 1. But I can create this distro-prefs file that says, when you are going to install this, apply this patch to it. Now that's not the only thing distro-prefs can do. And if you go and you read about this in the CPAN.pm documentation, you will see a heck of a lot of stuff that Andreas does to make the Perl world keep running. If you're a CPAN author, you probably get mail from him that's saying your module is screwed up in this way, like personal mail, not just his CPAN tester stuff. Because he's testing CPAN.pm against everything that everyone tries to upload. Distro-prefs can do things like, I'm going to change how you do tests. For instance, Mark Chason's develop trace module expects you to type something because it's expecting interaction as you're installing it. It's a very old module, it's done, he's not maintaining it anymore. Distro-prefs can come through and say, no, you're not going to do it like that. I'm going to change it in this way. Not just in patching the files, but how everything else interacts with it. An incredibly powerful system that we don't use enough. But Andreas goes through and makes these things by hand and distributes them. They come with CPAN.pm. And so you can go and look in that distribution and see these things. He said, I know this distribution is going to screw up, so do this before you try to install it. It's an amazing piece of technology that almost nobody knows about, and I don't even quite understand myself. Okay. So that's not so bad. That's 10 out of 10,000 files. We can actually do that ourselves. Is anyone keeping track yet how far off we are from 95%? Okay. Maybe whoever gets the right answer, I don't know what the right answer is. I didn't look this up. Might get a free book or something. And if you don't get a free book, you can buy them from Wendy and Liz, by the way. They spend all of their life carrying books around.
Just hopefully not as many to take back.
Okay, problem number 4, not so bad. Private modules aren't indexed. Now this is a big deal for the companies I work with. They insert their own stuff into their CPAN somehow. But that's a really easy problem. We just do all the same stuff. They just have to use my CPAN locally, and they can inject that stuff into the database, and then they have it. So this, depending on the company, is not that much. Okay, so maybe 10 files. Now here's here's the interesting thing that I haven't even started to work on, but I know it's coming up. You can have multiple releases, different releases of the same distribution installed at the same time, just in different directories. But if you do stuff like local live or -I or any of that sort of stuff, I might have to put more than one release of a particular distribution in the repository just because you have it installed in my home directory as the latest version, but it's some other version that was updated by the system administrator in the main thing. I haven't even begun to think about that problem. I think it should just happen, but I know that there are going to be those clashes because some of those distributions are going to contain the same files. And then what I'm going to have to do is go redo all the data structures because I'm assuming that one particular digest only shows up in one place locally. But now this might mean that the digest shows up in multiple places. That file that didn't change between distribution releases might show up in your home directory and in the Perl directories. This is just an exercise in data structure, really. It's like freshman comp sci sort of stuff. Yes?
And in Perl 6, you're going to have attention.
In Perl 6, it's not out yet, and so you should start doing it right from the start and not even need this tool.
Okay.
Oh, but the Perl 6 is even harder though, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say too much about this because you can say, I want this version from this author, from this source, and that might be go to the JVM, go to GitHub, and forget it, I can't, this is not going to do that. But when we get Perl 6, that stuff's going to be so cool. Yeah, I am looking forward to doing that, to say, I want to use this from this, from this, from this. And the list stuff. The list stuff just, oh, I want that so bad. Okay, so far, well, I didn't give you the suspense. This is what I got. On my stuff, just the things that I have on my machines, and I have about 30 Perls installed. And so this isn't so bad. And most of that installed at 9% was from which Perl do I pick and which of those 700 files do I remove. So this I'm feeling pretty good about. Now, so I've been having so much fun so far with this. But here, if you want to play with this sort of stuff, I'm going to give a quick plug for this. Some of you might know that I am working very lightly with Jeff Tallhammer, the Perl critic guy, on his new venture called CPAN. He wants to have private CPANs that you can do anything you want to, pin particular versions of distributions and so on, and have this as a service. He wants to sell this. This is how he wants to make money to support his wife and kid. So he has a beta, and we are thinking about if you participate in the beta, don't make any promises that you might get it for free for the rest of your life. So I don't know. But if you want to play with that sort of thing, he has that. And this thing I'm talking about, we want to provide somehow to the high-paying customers of that, where we will just take your digest and we will make your thing for you and let you upload private modules. If you also want to play with this, my code is ugly and I'm changing it all the time, so I'm not putting it anywhere. But if you want to send me your Perl installation, I have a little script, it's easy, it's file find in MP5. That will make that input file that I showed you. I will try to take your example and see if I can tell you what you have. I can't promise to do that, within a day or anything. It's just whenever I get back to working on it. But you can play with that. It's in a GIST. And don't worry about writing that down. If you go to blogs.perl.org, I have already posted this from SlideShare, and you can look at that and see all the stuff. And so on. Okay. So there's some stuff. This is all the back sort of stuff I did. Now, you had mentioned the other CPAN thing. I'll have to go check that out to see what they are doing. I know that Tim Bunce had done something, and I think he got very close. I'm trying to get that extra little bit. Someone else mentioned something I got to pay attention to. Remind me if you had some comment to come to me after so I can write it down and I can go investigate that thing. But otherwise, I'm a little bit short. We're going to be back on schedule. That's great. Are there any questions? How do you say thank you in Polish?
Dziękuję.
My tongue's not going to do that. I can't even do the Dutch words correctly. Okay, I've had a lot of fun doing this. If you're interested in this sort of thing, just read my blogs. I post all the interesting things about it there. Otherwise, thank you very much. And we have a break, I think, now, until 10:50.
10 minutes.
Oh, you are 10 minutes?
Okay, great.
So, I'll see you for the rest of the conference.